Hey guys, this is Dorian Day, and today I'm going to be running through my new track Regeneration, which is being released this Thursday under my alias Dèscartes on Audiophile Live. This run through is going to be split into 4 sections: arrangement, sound design, mixing, and mastering. For the arrangement and sound design portions, you can download the public splices and follow along on Ableton. So you can go to my splice, which is going to be /Dorian Day, and it's going to be up here on Thursday. I'm making this video before release, and you'll be able to download on /21 Dèscartes. So you'll be able to hear this before you go through the whole thing. There's going to be a link in the description as well. So for the arrangement on Splice, I flattened everything but the Ableton devices so that as many people as possible could benefit from the project without having all the plugins. The sound design portion contains all my favorite sound designs from the track, and the Ableton Splice has the original synths, MIDI notes, and automation. So this arrangement is all of the WAV files, so you can see everything that I did and hear it and mess around. And then the sound design has the actual plugins and parameters on the things that I thought were the coolest. I'm also going to go through the mixing and mastering, but they don't have any public splices because the mix was done in Cubase, and which isn't Splice compatible, and it just seemed kind of silly to put up an Ableton mastering project, but I'm going to go through what I did. So let's get started with the arrangement. You can see there's 5 groups. There's only 3 basic sections of the song. I guess 4 with the outro, but we have intro, breakdown, drop with a first and second drop, and then there's an outro, but it pretty much constitutes the elements that were already in the drop sort of fading out. We have an SFX group and then a drum bus or drum group. None of these are processed. I'm just organizing it this way. All of the group processing and mixing is done in Cubase. So let's check out the drums first. Now, there's not much to say, really, about drums, other than, you have to pick your samples pretty well, and try and pick interesting rhythms. But if you look through here, obviously the main element is the kick, which I made myself using sample layering and Sonic Academy kick. It actually has it, so you can use it if you want. And then we also have a clap. The clap I got from my sample library, so it's not one I made or layered. I just grabbed it right out of my sample library. I think one of the most distinguishing features is that you can see it comes in early, which gives it more of a thwack sound. But I also didn't even try out too many claps. I remember I tried out like 3 or 4, and this one was perfect. So, I mean, if you bring something in and it sounds good, then I don't hesitate to not fuss around with it too much. I don't even know if I EQ'd it based on this right here. I'm sure there was some low-end filtering to get rid of junk underneath. And we also did more in the mix. The other main elements are, see, the hi-hats. I'm pretty sure this was a grooved eighth note pattern, and it sounds like there's delay on it. This is just a alternating, it's like the offbeat. It's following this clap if it was on. I think it's just a white noise. Yeah, it's just a white noise hat. So basically the process I went about is I put in my min elements. I got my kick. I got my clap. And I put in the basic hi-hats, and then I started adding fills. So these little zips and glitches. And I mean, I just moved them around. I mean, it's pretty much that simple. It's about experimentation and just trying different rhythms. I mean, once you have your basic patterns down, like your kick and your snare and your basic hi-hats, choose some other sort of small but unique and recognizable elements and fit them in different places. They can like replace or layer over one of your pre-existing elements, or they can fit in between the spaces. They can happen at irregular intervals. So instead of once a bar every 4 bars, they sort of introduce each element into each other. If you listen, I'll try and find a specific example. So just in this first section, if you listen, you're going to hear a pop. And then right after it, you hear the snare. It's like pop. And it's almost like there's like a call and response going on, and they reinforce each other. I can't tell you that I consciously tried to do that. I think that in some instances I definitely did, and in others I put an element somewhere that I thought that I thought sounded good, and then when I listened, I noticed that they worked together. So I mean, part of music is, even if you don't necessarily know 100% what to do, it's experimenting and deciding based on your intuition how you feel about something and whether or not it works. And this comes mostly from experience. And then also you can hear it again with the zip near the end of this 5-bar measure or section. Or sorry, right there. So right before 3, you hear this zip, and then, or you hear the noise and then the zip, and they seem as if they're moving and working together. And I mean, the other noticeable thing to pay attention to is the addition and subtraction of elements. So once we start listening to the mix, you can hear how these work together. But if you look in this section right here, you can see that I start with a number of main elements, mainly the kick, these zips, perks, a couple hi-hats, but I don't start with the clap. I add it in at 17. And then after the first section, the first initial build, there's sort of like a fake out if you listen here. And all of the drum elements drop out, and then they build back in. And then there's even a new thing. It's this little zap. And that way you get more mileage out of your elements, because you've added them all in, and then you take them away. People almost forget about them, and you work with something else down here. Or in this case, it's like my bass line and melody, if you want to call it that. And then you build the drums back in, and all of a sudden they're interesting again. Whereas if you just play them all the way through, you're gonna get fatigued. I used the same drums all the way through. I don't think I added anything. No, if you look, it's pretty much the same pattern repeated. There's a little bit of a difference when I start doing things in the outro. But this is sort of like a, I don't know, tech progressive step song. Doesn't really have a fitting genre. So depending on what genre you're making, you might not be able to repeat your drums as much. All right, let's listen to the intro. So what's going on? Well, I have sort of this like fading in introduction where the main bass comes in. We're going to take a look at the automation in the sound design, but basically it has like a really fast envelope and the cutoff is really low and it starts like plucking upwards, whereas this bass starts high passed and starts to develop over time. And they sort of meet, and then this one drops out, and we can hear this happening. So so one comes from the low, one comes from the high, and I think pretty sure they're exactly the same patch, and if they're not, there's slight variations, but we'll check that out. And they meet in the middle, and then there's this like sound effects event, and then the top one drops out, and we just bring back into the main bass just fully developed. So that's pretty much what happens is they work together and then the intro one drops out and then basically the rest of the song starts developing. So then after one section with just the bass, the intro lead starts to come in. And this is where you can see the drums interacting. Is I introduce the lead and I drop out all the drums and then I start building the drums back up. And then I start adding even these more extra elements as we build towards the breakdown. So if you listen, notice how from right here, the drums drop out. Okay, so that's how the drums and intro basses and leads work together to sort of develop the different sections and get the most out of all of your elements. I mean, we're able to use this same bass line pattern for what, 15, 30, 45, a minute and a half, just by adding and subtracting elements. And when you listen to the song, I mean, at least to me, it maintains interest. And then next we have the sound effects, and that pretty much completes the first section of the song before we reach the breakdown. And there's an ample amount of them. Two of the most interesting things, this is the ambiance, or one of the ambiances of the song. Now, what that is it's just audio recorded from the backyard of my partner at Sick Twisted Mind Studios, Eric's backyard, which is sort of bumping up against nature. I got this trick from deadmau5. It's some interview. He talks about recording the silence on the top of his Toronto apartment building, and it's just this low-level noise with a certain added character. He mixes it really low in the mix, and it sort of becomes the noise floor of the track, and it has, I guess, interesting interactions with the compressor. I added a phaser on it, and mixed it pretty low and did some drastic EQing. And then we have this weird ambiance. And what that is it's a 2-van groan. So when you have like Himalayan throat singers, which you can Google and listen to, has a pretty distinct sound. And I found that sample and it was cool. I don't remember exactly what I processed it with. It sounds like some kind of side chaining and phasing. And then I mixed that underneath and it becomes this rhythmic ambiance element. And you can try and hear it in the mix. There you go. Let's see. Next we have this vowel, which is missing. Interesting. Well, I'll try and fix that for the actual project. Interesting. Okay. Next, we have a noise spray that introduces the next section. You can hear it. I'm pretty sure that's just bright white noise out of massive. It's definitely EQ'd and it might be amped. And this is what it sounds like in the mix. Just kind of like this subtle spray to introduce the next sections. Next, we have the reverse cymbal. That takes us into the next section once again. And then finally, we have all the lifters. Okay, there were some missing sound effects files, but I fixed them. So let's go back to the missing ones. So here's the one I initially skipped, the sound effects file. Without all of the sound effects, it sounds like it sounds like I'm chirping water, I think. I'm not exactly sure what it was or where it came from, but with the sound effects, it makes this like metallic ambiance that if you listen in the mix, which that's too loud. So it's just like subtle, very subtle background change. All of these things are just to like add a bit of subtle interest. Like people aren't really paying attention, but if you listen really closely, it's like, what was that thing? And then here we go. So let's check out here's the up filter, and then it goes into the hall kick and some kind of cinematic slam. Okay, now for the breakdown. So one of the first things is that it switches time signatures. It goes from 4/4 to 3/4. This whole section's in 3/4. And then I'll talk about what happens up here to fix that. And it's just a bunch of layers of things. I mean, this is just a bell lead. I think it's out of Zebra. It has a slight bit of delay. And this is like some kind of 8-bit distorted lead. I think it's out of Massive. That develops over time. Synth swell. I think that's zebra as well. These were all presets that I'd made or collected over time. Nothing too special. I'm just kind of showing you what each layer is. A pluck again, I think out of zebra, and they're all playing the same arpeggio. I don't think the chords for this are in the sound design because this isn't the most interesting part of the song. That's a low piano note, and it has a automated filter on it. I think it's Sound Toys, and it has like an LFO on the filter cutoff. Next we have an arpeggio, or just another arp since these are all arps. And they all layer together to sound like this. And then it starts building into this crescendo. We have these saws coming in. And this orchestra. And that's a contact orchestra. So it's like the whole ensemble. Contact violins. Saw bass. Cello. And it sounds like this. And oh, there's the sound effects down here. You can hear some more. There's just repetition of... No, sorry, that's before. Okay. And these are just out of my sound effects library. I didn't make them. So I just tried a couple out until I found one I liked, and that was in the correct like time. And then I EQ'd it. I layered them if necessary. Like there's a cymbal crash as well. And it all sounds like this. Or here you can listen to this crash too. Mixed together. Some mix problem going on there. Too much of that. So because we're in 3/4, to get this to kind of all work out, at least in what I wanted to write, this needed to be 24 bars of... Wait, let me get my measuring tool. Yeah, so I wanted 2 8-bar repetitions of this arpeggio phrase. And to kind of like switch it out of 3/4 time. And I'm not any kind of musical savant, so this is my best explanation of this because it just sort of worked. I wanted it to cadence on the tonic. And also switch back to 3/4. But the only way that made sense, sounding good, was to use 4 bars, because if I'd made it last 8 bars, it would have sounded weird. And if I'd done 2, then that would have been really awkward. So I did 4, and then I did like an illegal sound effects fill. And I don't know if this is a technical term, but if you read Rick Snowman's book, The Dance Music Manual, he calls it an illegal fill. Any section of a dance song that's not an 8-bar phrase, because it sort of messes with the traditional expectations of a DJ of what's going on. So anytime there's a section of your song that's not 8 bars in length, it's a quote-unquote illegal fill. Sometimes it's nice to add these all up. So if you have a 2-bar illegal fill somewhere, then you try and do it again, and you have another 2-bar illegal fill, and then maybe somewhere else you can add 4. You can see this in Martin Garrix's Animals, both in the radio and original mix. If you look at the different section or lengths of his fills, I'm pretty sure at the end they add up to 8, even though in each individual section they're an odd length. So yeah, so I have this 4-bar illegal fill to kind of build back up into the next section. And we pretty much go back into the original track. Except for we have a new lead. And it's this one right here. So pretty much what we do is we switch out this lead for this one. And I'm going to show you how to make that in the sound design section, because that's pretty much the coolest sound in the project as far as I'm concerned. So there's not a whole lot new going on. It's pretty much the exact same drum progression. I mean, it looks exactly the same to me. I can't tell. I don't recall if there's any minute differences, but I don't think so. We use the same main bass as in the intro. The cutoff and release and automation is slightly different to sort of match better with the lead. They kind of play in and out together. I changed the pluck, I think, right? Is that a different pluck? Yeah, it's a different pluck too. And then the new lead. But most of the interest comes from the automation and the addition and subtraction of drums, and then a couple sound effects things, but it's mostly just sprays again. We're going to go through it in the sound design, but also aside from the automation, what makes these sound interesting is because the notes just repeat over and over again, which would normally be boring, but we have a groove going on, and the groove, for whatever reason, changes the pitch perception as well. So it sounds like the notes are changing, but they never do. So we can hear the breakdown or the build into the breakdown again. So then the breakdown repeats, the sound effects on the breakdown repeat, and then this whole section of the drop repeats again. And then we have a second drop. So I guess I'm just going to play it again like you just heard, except for we're going to build into the second drop. I'm going to play that through, and then I'm going to explain kind of what's going on. Okay, so what's going on? Well, I sort of made everything go crazy. I kept the main bass, and I kept the main synth, and then I added a bunch of fills. Now, obviously, the rhythms change quite drastically, and they even change in the drums too. So this is the only place I think that the drums change. Now, how did I do this? Well, I had a reference song in mind, another song where they go into this crazy triplet madness, and I didn't copy exactly what they did, but I looked very carefully at what they did and tried to pay attention to how the elements worked together. There's a lot of similarity between the one that I referenced in this, but theirs is, in my opinion, still way better. But like I would listen to where their hi-hats were, and I would put my hi-hats where they were. And the same thing for most of these elements, which was pretty hard to hear. You'd have to slow down the track. And then once I had where those were mapped out, I kind of saw what was going on, and I deleted and add and changed and shifted around until I had something that was new. I added elements one at a time. I'm pretty sure I think I did the main bass right here first. And then I did the drums, and then I added the other fills, and the fills were presets that I made or collected out of Massive, like dubsteppy things. There's a sub. And there's Ninja Stars, which is this Hans Zimmer preset out of Zebra. It's like for the Dark Knight. Block. Not really any sound effects going on. And then the sound design section, I think we have all of these, so you can look at it and mess around. But I mean, you're free to now try and make your own kind of rhythms similar to this, just like I did by looking at someone else's and then making something new. At least it's easier because you don't just have to listen. You're gonna have the MIDI files. And then for the outro, I basically just dropped things out. Like you can see, I dropped out this one of the fills, and then the block, and then we dropped out the fill 2 and the sub. The drums start to go away. The thing that kind of keeps going is this main synth and the bleeps, and it kind of, to me, sounds like a machine. The only plugins that are in the pack or in this splice are the two reverbs, Ubic A and Lexicon Concert. I put these in because I didn't want to use the Ableton stock or give the impression that I used the Ableton stock reverb, because while it's not bad, it's not the best choice for every song all the time. So you can replace this with whatever reverb you prefer. And I think that's about it for the arrangement. I would explain more, but I'm hoping giving the splice away and then going over the sound design is kind of what everyone would want anyways. If there's any specific questions of things you want to know about this, I'll answer them. And then you can see on the master that there's this ghetto mastering going on. It's just kind of to make it loud when I'm playing it, but this is not the mastering that's eventually used. So enjoy the arrangement, and we'll see you in the sound design section. All right, next we're coming into the sound design splice. Once again, you can just download this on my Splice page. It has all of the sections that I thought were interesting and worth giving away. I suppose if someone really wanted the breakdown, I would put it up, but it just isn't like the coolest part of this song. It's just the breakdown. There's thousands of those. So here we have a kick. I put this so that the rest of the things wouldn't sound lame on their own. The first thing is the hi-hat. I think this hi-hat, probably my finest hi-hat or drum achievement to date. The pattern is pretty basic, as you can see. It's just eighth notes, except for we have double eighth notes on, eighth notes? 16th notes, double 16th notes on the last eighth note. And it just follows through, except for this slightly different pattern at the end where I drop out for a second. Now, what's cool is that slide sound. And the reason that happens is because I increase the decay envelope in certain sections. You can see it on the sampler. So it almost sounds like a more open kind of hit. I don't really play the drums. I don't know how to describe it, but I know it's a different kind of like drumming technique, which this procedure simulates. So you would just take a sample that's kind of long, or at least has some length to it. I mean, that's what it sounds like with full decay. And you shorten the decay and you get this like snappy little hat. But then you can automate it and you get both. And it sort of sounds glitchy too. So I was pretty happy with that, and that's why I included it. Otherwise, in general, I mean, I'm going to eventually do drum tutorials, but in terms of going through a song, it's not particularly the most interesting thing unless you have tricks like that. So next we have the bass intro, where I was talking about in the arrangement where the basses meet together. We have the low one. And I guess we should go over the patch first. Let's see. I'm not going to go into extreme depth because you can download this and check it out yourself. But we have two oscillators. One, right? Yep, only two. One's a saw, no change in the octave or note. And then we have a sine, two voices, one octave up, lowering the volume. Everything's in mono, no stereo, no detune, no phase. Pan is centered. Then we have 24 dB low pass filter, cut off all the way down. Have distortion on, it's overdrive, this amount, this dry wet, and then we have an envelope with that increases the cutoff of A and increases the distortion amount a little bit, and then you can see that envelope setting. And then we have automation on the filter cutoff, and you can hear how this sounds. Almost like a heartbeat. So there you see it kind of evolves slowly, and then it falls back down and does it again. We'll talk about that. There's a little bit of processing, a slight bit of mixing, some cutting out of the lows, a little boosting around 600, slight amping, side chaining, and then this filter isn't turned on. We have the same patch, right? Exact same patch, pretty much. The cutoff is different, but that might just be where it is in its automation. Nope, only frequency is automated. So this is just a static patch with these settings. Basically the same as the last one with some changes right here. And then, yeah, same effect, but then we have the filter turned on and automated to kind of cut up, and you can hear how this sounds. Sorry to cut down. I'm gonna skip. And then you can see them meeting like I described initially in the arrangement. And then they replace each other. Okay, and then we come over here and we have the lead start coming in. Now this is so pretty much what makes this cool is you add the sign but an octave and 3 notes higher, so it's a minor third, and everything else is the same as the bass. Pretty sure you play it. Wait, I didn't go over the notes. You should go over the notes of the main bass. They are simple. G0, G1, just alternating. It's almost like a trance arp. Back to the lead. Same deal, except for an octave higher, G1 to G2. So you can see how much you can get out of like an incredibly simple patch, just making a small change and duplicating it. I mean, even the same notes. I mean, it's just automation and other mixed things make a difference, but also this kind of music is prone to repetitiveness, so this might not work as well in pop or main room or something. And if you look at the different cutoffs, in this case they're traveling together, but you can see the frequency changing. And this one cutting out. They play together more in the actual verse, if you want to call it, but that's how this section works. Then we have same drums, I just kept them in, and the main bass is the same, pretty sure. Let's go in and look. Same mixing. Yep. Slightly different settings, but mostly the same. Then the lead. So the lead is even the same, except for we switched to a square wave. And we added more automation, I believe. There's something missing. I'm gonna have to stop. Okay, I was wrong. There's nothing missing. I just don't remember things exactly how they were. It's been a while. I made this song before Serum came out, so it was sometime in September or before. So anyways, these actually are the complete parts, at least the interesting ones. I took out the pluck. But like I was saying, it's the same. These are the same patches as over here, just slightly adjusted. This one switches from a sine to a square, and I think it increases the voices, and no, there's not even any detuning. but there's an echo boy. Yeah, I guess I decided to leave that. Which sort of adds this like ambience to it. And these kind of play together. I thought they played like they went counter to each other, but apparently they only work together. So that's pretty much that. Not a lot going on. Mostly the automation and changes and switching of drums and background elements and blah blah blah, and then eventually mixing that makes this the song that it eventually becomes on the release. So I guess let's go through the last section, which is the second drop. Now all of the extra percussion is missing, which adds quite a bit to this, but like I was saying in the arrangement, I used a reference song for this. If you think these rhythms are cool, then I recommend finding another song like this or using mine. You can use my MIDI notes. I mean, yeah, to an extent. I mean, don't completely remake it, but you can mess around and try these out. And then the patches are here. I guess the main bass is repeated. It just has the rhythm changed. And then it has this, it has an auto filter set to cut the lows when the fills come in, so that these work together. So that they don't conflict. Then we have the main synth, and this is playing the same notes. Oh, actually there is one thing. The thing that does change is the notes. I forgot, the lead note changes. So the patch doesn't really change, but the notes do change. Not on the bass, but on the lead. And I forgot, it's whatever key this is. I'd have to check, but it's like C minor, I think. It looks like it's C minor. Yeah. So I grabbed the minor third and then the fifth and was just kind of like playing through that. And then there's a groove going, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure my version had a groove. I'm not sure how Ableton copies over things, because I made a copy of this. So hopefully everything is exactly how it is, but this is my first time doing it, so it's gonna take some time to experiment, but this is pretty much exactly what was in my song. All right, back to here. We have the main synth again. It's the same notes, except for we're jumping around differently. I add this bleep at different intervals. And that's a zebra patch, just some Armada pluck. And this fill, a massive dubstep rise, as I called it. You can look at this patch, though I don't really recommend trying to do this from the screen. Definitely get the Splice. And once again, that's what it sounds like. And this is another miscellaneous dubstep sound. So I used short notes and then long notes because it sounds interesting both ways. A sub. I think it's following mostly the main bass, but it actually plays against. So you'd have to check against all of the midis. I'm not sure if the sub ever plays by itself or if it's always reinforcing something else. but without it. With it. Then Ninja Stars, another Zebra preset. This time, like it's this Hans Zimmer Dark Knight thing, or I guess it's Sword Master, but it's it was from the. It's either by Hans Zimmer or mimicking him, but I think it's by him for Zebra. And then a block out of my sample library, and they just all work together to do this. So like I said in the arrangement, I had a reference track for this. I tried to replicate their notes as closely as I could. It was pretty hard. I had to slow down the track, and it was still even sort of complicated. And then I changed them and made it my own. You can either take these MIDI notes and analyze them, mess around with them. You can try and did what I did with either my track or a similar track, slow it down and try and replicate each element and see how they work together, and then mess around and change that. But these MIDI notes are probably a good basis for experimentation. And that pretty much does the sound design. If anyone has any specific questions and about this, I'll answer them. Or if they have any specific questions on any of the sounds it didn't include, I'm willing to put up another splice or a tutorial on other things. But these were the things that I thought were the most interesting, and I didn't want to overput stuff. Okay, so next I brought my mix into Cubase to mix it. The way you do that is you export all your stems in the export menu in Ableton without, well, depending on whatever settings you want. I'm pretty sure I did 32-bit, and my sample rate was 44.1. So just keep your settings the same, or if you don't, be smart about what you change. And then you can just drag them all in. I have them all organized, but when you drag them in, they're just imagine all the tracks lining up here. It takes up a lot of space to do this, so better have a big hard drive. But I really like to mix in Cubase versus Ableton. I'm sure other DAWs are good too. Like I'm gonna try out Logic, and Softtube has this new external mixing device that seems pretty neat. But the biggest reason I use Cubase for mixing is because you can organize groups better, and a couple other more advanced controls. But this isn't a super Cubase tutorial. This is more of a how to mix this song. So first of all, I grouped everything, or all the drums together, and I mixed them first. They're all going into a drum bus up here. But as we can look at the mixer, maybe. Okay. And the cool thing about Cubase's mixer is you can hide things. So I'm gonna hide everything but the drums. Okay, now you can see down here we only have the drums. So what do I have going on? Well, I started with the kick. It was already -8 in the other track, but I did some further processing. I set it to -8 again, did some slight compression. You can see the settings here. Mid-level ratio on the Softtube. The threshold, not even, God, is this even doing anything? It is, it's just barely bouncing, as you can see. And then here are the attack and release settings. And then I have the FabFilter Pro L. Just so that the peaks hit it, and it stays under -8 or at it. Then we have the clap, it's sitting at -3.21, but it actually, what's its actual decibels? So solo the drums. So you can see it's coming in at negative 18.4, even though the channel volume's at negative 3.21. It's because there's only some compression. Just a little bit. You can hear without it. I mean, these are all super subtle things. I mean, you might even call me crazy for saying I hear anything, but who knows? I try. And try and make subtle changes and see if you think it improves your mix. This is how you develop, I guess, a mixing style. I mean, to me, it definitely brings out like the crunch and the clap. It might just because it's raising the volume, but it seems like it has an interesting groove to it in the release because of the envelope settings on the compressor. And then there's a slight bit of EQing. You can see a boost at about 1K, again at 10, and then some roll off. Oops, that wasn't good. Okay, hopefully I didn't mess anything up. From here, you can see I didn't really change the volumes from the original Ableton file, so you can go in there and check the splice to see what the volume levels were set at, because this is kind of like a final mix. I mean, it's already pretty much mixed when it's in the arrangement in terms of not having any of the stuff you absolutely should not have, and this is sort of like a final polish of all of the tracks. So we don't have any processing until track 21, where we have the hi-hats, and I have the isotope transient designer, or no, trash, sorry. Try and just get the clap. Hi-hat, I mean. It's actually a zap. Oh, it's because I'm listening to the wrong one. There we go. I can definitely hear the compressor. I'm not sure I can still hear the trash. Yeah, it makes it a little brighter instead. To me, it brings the snap up higher in the frequency spectrum. And you can see some boosting or cutting and boosting. So we have some cutting at 676 and some boosting at 2.1 and 3.9. Or I guess that's a high shelf actually. Most of the mixing in the other project was left, as much of it as I could. So you can still go back there and see. And then there's a slight bit of compression on the zap. You can hear it makes it pop, and it also brings in this like sizzle thing. So it brings part of the character of the sound more forward. Probably just from volume increases. Yeah, it's barely hitting. So that's probably one of the cases where I was crazy. But the cut is for sure helping, and so is that boost right there at 5K. And that pretty much does it for each individual track in the drum bus, but then we have the drum bus itself. So I'm going to turn off everything, and then you can hear it come back on. Now, one problem with what I'm doing right now is I'm not volume level matching, but this is the best impression of this you're going to get, because I'm not going to sit here and volume match every audio or change in the effect, but you can still hear it change as they come on, and then we'll describe what they do. Actually, I'll do it in sequence, I guess. So this is a saturation. Sound Toys Decapitator is probably one of the best saturators on the market. It's on the T style. They describe in the manual what each does, but I don't recall right now. Pretty low settings, as you see. It's about 2 on the drive, and the mix is really low. And it gives just the subtlest changes in effect. I'm going to try and raise the drum bus, I guess, and hear this. It sort of gives it a bit of compression. It's like saturation compression. You can even see this thing bouncing on the attitude. And it's kind of as like the circuit reacts to the saturation. So you don't get the same level of saturation the whole way through. And this, I mean, it appears to have a compression effect. And also it warms up and tightens up the mix. Then we have Saturn for more compression, or I mean more saturation, except for multi-band this time. I'm pretty sure, yeah, the low is on or off? On, mix full. So you can see we're only saturating these sections. It's a preset, it's crispy fat. I don't recall if I changed it much. Better loop. So let's turn Saturn on. Off. I'm gonna just turn it on and off a couple times. To me, it makes the low end more punchy and clear. And it kind of like balances out the frequency spectrum the rest of the place. It to me, it makes it sound slightly less like muddy or dark. I'm not sure if that's the best phrase though. Makes it more lively. It's the best way I can express it right now. Next, we have the alias alpha compressor. Yeah, alpha. And it just adds a bit of character on the enveloping. It like grabs it and lets it go. It's pretty much adding groove. I mean, I suppose it makes it a little more cohesive, but I mean, at this point with the saturation, we're getting pretty close to glued. I mean, the best way I can describe it is it makes me want to bob my head more. All right, next we have the tube tech. Just like we put on the kick. And once again, it's just like another level of added groove. I think the alias is a cleaner compressor. This one is like tube saturated, so it also adds like tube character. It's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm gonna add this like sort of really clean, super precise digital mix compressor, and then this tube saturating compressor. That was my thought process. I don't know how sophisticated that truly is. And I have a 2-band 2-band multiband compression and de-expansion. And as you can see, this is mostly working on the high end because I thought the low was pretty good as it was. I'm going to turn off the de-expansion. So here's Alchemist on. All right, so no, I guess I turned it off. All right, so here, I'm gonna keep it off for a second, then turn it on. Sorry. You know, I guess I didn't actually put any multi-band compression. It's just de-expansion. I don't even know why this was selected. Yeah, only the de-expansion is working. And this brings up the I guess you call it like the noise floor, like the low level information in the high band. So it's kind of like, it's the opposite of compression. So instead of like lowering the peaks, we raise the valleys or troughs. And it has a similar effect to compression. It ends up popping and bouncing more, but it sounds more organic and less like pressed because you keep the transients while still decreasing the dynamic range, and it brings it like brightness and sheen. And it tightens up the high end, in my opinion. All right, a slight bit of limiting. Guess I should have done a volume warning. Sorry. And then obviously that brings up like the RMS, so it limits it, makes it louder. And then there's a slight bit of stereo imaging. So I focus the low end a lot, and then I spread the high a little bit. So anyways, that completes the drum bus. Lots of stuff going on. Okay, so with the drums done, we can look at the intro. So you can see on the intro lead, I cut the, I put a low shelf on everything below, starting like a 1K. Bad. There's a Nugent stereoizer to spread the top a little bit. I mean, it makes a huge impact on the sound. Instantly spreading it apart. All right, we have an LFO tool, or I guess on the bass we have a slight bit of boosting at like 61 and 5K. And an LFO tool just acting as a side chain because I'm not sure how to side chain yet in Cubase. I don't really want to bother either. It's not as easily as Ableton as far as I can tell. The channel strip, there's also a bit of compression here and on saturation built in from Cubase. I hope I didn't miss that on the drum bus. It does not appear as if I did, except for maybe right here or here. Type saturation. All right, so there was some extra saturation that I forgot to mention. Okay, so yeah, and then we're basically done with what goes on the synths, and we just have to talk about what's on the bus. It's pretty much the same, similar settings. I switched the saturation mode, increased the drive a little bit in the mix. Popped on an Aphex Vintage Twin to brighten up the high end, make it sizzle. It's subtle, but you can hear it. Next we have the tube tech. You can hear it adds in bounce. Next we have the Pro Q. I don't know why I used, oh yeah, because I wanted to do, I wanted to lower the low end of just the stereo channel, so that's why I used the Pro Q instead of the Cubase. So we're just cutting the low of the stereo channel. Then we have a limiter. I don't even think it's really hitting it, it's just bringing up the volume level a little bit. Yeah. Okay, and then finally we change the stereo image. Again, decrease all the lows, and then just cut the highs a little bit to balance out with the drums. I sort of filled out the spaces a little bit where I had the drums cut. And that pretty much does it for the synth bus. Next is the breakdown. Once again, not much going on. I put some saturation on the break arp. Just some smooth amp, pretty simple. And that's it. So they were already pretty much mixed in the Ableton project. Once again, saturation on the bus. I think it's the same as the intro synth bus. Probably Aphex Vintage, probably the same as the synth bus. Alias, Impressor. I just tried to use that as glue. Hopefully it's doing its job. Yeah, I think I can hear it bringing them together. All right, and then some limiting. All right, that does it for there. Then we have the drop bus. And there's more processing, hopefully, here. Yeah, okay, so you can see on the drop lead, we cut the low highs. Well, actually, no, it's the same as the intro. It's the same processing. Nugent Stereo, LFO tool, different notes, same mixing pretty much. This looks like the exact same as, which bus was it? Intro synth? Yep, same as the intro synth bus. So I'm not going to go over that again. The settings might be slightly different, but same general concept. And there was basically no mixing on the drop 2 section because it was all done in Ableton. I'm pretty sure all that stuff is still left in there. The things just kind of fit and mixed in with each other. That's the importance of sample arrangements. When you hear people talk about, oh, the sample arrangement's like the most important part, I mean, it's a lot of it, because if you choose things that you don't have to carve and mess with so much, then you don't have to do a lot of work afterwards, and it's mostly just polishing. But I mean, if you take things that clash, then you're gonna have to work pretty hard to make it all work, and I've definitely had to do that before. Sound effects bus. Sound effects. Just setting volume levels. I guess I'll look back over the volume levels because that's probably the only thing there might be left to talk about. Sound effects bus. It didn't even have any processing. I just let it all go. Ambience, there's some LFO tool, and so side chaining and limiting or compression. I guess a slight boost in the volume. So let's see. Let's bring all the things up. So all the way on the left, we have all our buses. The drum bus is set at 3.4. Should be at -8. I don't know. Hopefully, I'm definitely not saving this project. I can tell you that. Drum bus is supposed to be at -8 because the main kick drum was at -8. I prefer that to be my reference point. I mean, you can use other values, -12 or higher. I don't really recommend going higher because my mixes end up being around -4, and I don't think you should push much higher than that. Makes just the whole process a little more difficult and harder to manage. So the intro synths at -12, breakdown bus -12, drop bus -11, sound effects bus at 0, and then the reverb, it's reverb and ambience. That's what that is. That's all set at 0. And once again, there's limiting, so these are all brought up pretty close at their maximum levels within the section at those peaks. Like the breakdown starts pretty low, but it eventually builds up to a crescendo that definitely peaks at -12 decibels. And then you can see some of the other volume levels for the other tracks. A lot of them are set at 0 because I had the volume set in Ableton on the original arrangement, which you can go check. And here's some changes in the drums. I did more mixing. Most of the mixing happened in the drums. Yeah, not much. Pretty much no. Yeah, all the sound effects, everything, all 0 because they were all just pretty much perfect where they needed to be, or I made some changes to the bus. And that basically finishes it. So from here, you would export this all. Export, audio mix down, and I would export this. I didn't change the sample rate or the bit depth or anything because I'm going to master in Ableton, but that finishes the mix. All right, now we're in the mastering section. So I brought in the exported WAV file from Cubase, and you can see it here. The only thing I'd kind of like to point out is that the track looks kind of, the volume levels look consistent and smooth. It's not like wildly changing, which is a characteristic of tracks that you see that are like end up sounding good. I mean, if you have crazy wild dynamics, then when you come into mastering stage, you're going to end up smashing one thing more than the other, and some sections are going to sound too pressed and distorted or too quiet or any of a number of things. So if you want to go to good master, try and have a mix that's consistent. At least that's my advice. Someone can contradict me if they wish. So I'm going to listen through to certain sections with and without the mastering. You can see at the bottom I have it level matched. It's about an 8 decibel difference in terms of peak, not RMS. So we can check this out. I'll start without mastered. So let's go. So that's the intro. You can try the breakdown. All right, and then I'll just go to the second drop section. So anyways, that's what it sounds like with and without the mastering chain on. I'm going to show you what I did. I don't claim to be a master at this. I'm definitely not even close. I'm just kind of shooting blindly based on all of the things I've ever read. My aim was to get the loudest RMS of the track to hit -4 of some kind. So mostly bouncing around -5, but actually hitting -4, which it does. You can see with this meter, dynamic range meter. So I wanted to be all EDM-y and be loud. So the goal was to hit that mark without it sounding like a distorted turd. I think I achieved it. And this is what I did. So I started with some saturation. It has no drive, but the wet is all the way up. I guess I'll add things one at a time. But once again, it's not going to be volume matched, so it's only kind of a representation. You have to do this with volume matching if you want to really hear what the effect is doing. So once again, I think it glues the track together, just like I used it on the buses in the mix. Like warms it up, kind of tames like the high ends and just glues it, as non-scientific a word as that is. And then we have a fab filter compressor. The attack's really fast and the release is really fast, and the ratio is mid-level. It's just to grab the peaks and bring them down. It sort of brings some attitude in the track. It's like it grabs it for a moment and lets it go. For these kind of purposes, I think if the compression is kind of trying to make you want to bob your head and add groove to the track without destroying the dynamics or integrity of the sound. Then we have the alpha compressor, which I'm not sure is doing anything. And it isn't. Apparently I just forgot to delete this, so I was using the glue instead. And this has the automatic release and a pretty slow attack, low threshold and whatnot to add a kind of like a slow groove. So the fast compressor kind of adds like a quick kind of bouncy thing, and the glue sort of grabs the whole waveform, if you will, instead of just intermediate transients, and shapes it together. So it's sort of like short duration groove and then long duration groove, and just also controlling the transients before you get to limiting. I think it especially helps the bass region bounce. Next we have the Saturn, which is just on warm tape. Once again, I think this even more emphasizes that change in the low frequency that's brought in by the glue compressor, and makes it defines the low end to me. Next we have Alchemist. It has 3 bands, grabbing to sort of like the mid-low, the mids, and then the high is ish. But apparently not, because it's not doing anything. Is it? Yeah. Okay. I use it for its clipper. It has an awesome clipper. So I clip by like 1 decibel and it brightens and starts to get you towards that really limited sound, and trying to do it tastefully and gently and with good plugins so that it doesn't sound bad at the end. But I think it especially brings some serious punch into the mix. Okay, next we have Fab Filter L. So our first limiter, have it, oh, my volume was too loud. Okay, hello? Geez, what am I doing? Okay, sorry, my headphone volume was too loud when that happened. Probably yours too. Sorry about this. I'll probably make some changes. Otherwise, viewer be warned. So we're getting about 6 decibels of peak limiting. The look ahead's pretty high, so there's not much clipping involved. And I have it on transparent mode. So that's grabbing our first peaks. And then the only way I know how to make these things loud without making it sound like crap is to stack limiters. I'm not really sure what other people are doing. Hopefully this. But I'm barely getting anything, as you can see. It's like, I mean, not even 0.5. The one thing that I'll comment is that you can hear like the different attacks of the different limiters. So you might want to try and get them in time if you don't want it to flicker like that. That helps a little bit, but that's not what was on my mix. I have that fluttering. And then one more limiter. This time it's clipping. You can see look ahead's all the way up in 3.5. Gain, punchy. This is the mastering, so dither at 16 bits, oversampling, inner sample peak detection so that you get inner sample peaks. You should read about that if you don't know what it is. It has to do with MP3 conversion, or I'm pretty sure either that or it's ADC conversion, but it's a thing. That's basically just our final stage of limiting, and that's what gets us up to -4 over here. So that extra clipping on the end by the Pro L is what gets us that extra decibel of RMS to try and get us beatport friendly. Yeah, no EQing. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I was happy. I'm happy with the end results. I eventually hope to have a mastering engineer, but this is what it is for now. I think this wraps up the whole track run through. The only thing I would do from here is you export at 16 bits, no dithering, because the Fab filter is doing that. Pop this into an audio editor, and well, you can do this here. You can do it in Fab filter or in an audio editor. I do it in an audio editor. You can reduce the peaks by -0.3 before converting to MP3. Otherwise, you'll get digital clips. That's just how, I don't know, the MP3 format works. I don't have any more explanation than you need to slightly lower your peak volume after limiting before converting to MP3 to get the highest fidelity possible. Then, put in your ID tags and release your song. All right, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm willing to go over any of this process. Thanks.